Record to cloud. Okay, so we're here to kind of pick up where we left off, which is, as you said, is this really number 9? Can it be? That's impossible. Somehow we're nine episodes deep into globetrotter here, and we're going to see if we can get our sort of CRUD actions taken care of here. So let me get this stuff fired up. This is the backend, Rails S. By the way, as this thing gets up and running, if you all recall the last meeting, I kind of glazed over a navlink issue. Okay, what is happening? Why won't you full size me? I don't know what's happening here. All right, we're gonna switch screens. Maybe it's a monitor issue? Maybe. So Zoom's acting really weird. I'm gonna move you to my other screen. Sorry about that. Okay, can everyone see this still okay?
Yes.
Looks good.
Okay, so if you'll recall, we had this weird glitch where I have my active class and my nav links when I'm looking from one place to another within trips, and it wasn't working. It was kind of bugging out a little bit, and the problem was, I'll show you what I mean here as I get this up and running. All right, so if I click on one of these, notice that now only one of them is turning green. That was our active. Class little CSS that we added just so we could see that it's working. And previously it wasn't doing that. And I'll show you exactly what I did to fix that. What happens is navlink is going to look for the nearest route to say, like, where am I? What's going on? What should I look for in terms of where my current location is? And inside of source, components app.js, within our nav link, which is our nav bar, I should say, which is being rendered here from app. We look at the nav bar. This is where we are. This is where our nav links are. And this is probably tiny for you. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, it's good, thanks.
Yeah, just always tell me if it's not readable. And if I look at these links, let's see, route link. So it's this nav link right here. And notice that it has active class active. And if I look at the actual HTML, that's what's going to sort of tell the story of what's going on. Notice that now, as I go back and forth, see how it changes? One's active, the other's active. And what was happening was, in React, navlink wasn't able to find what it uses to get that information. And so what I did was, I explicitly, from app, said, before I render navbar, I'm going to provide it with my history, my location prop coming from my router props that I have here with router. When I do that, it's going to make it so that the components inside of navbar can see the version of where we are that it needs to see in order to make the comparison and get the correct information. And now if I look at a particular nav link, or if I look at my nav bar, I should say, I have my location prop, and that's now visible. Navlink can find it. And that's why this is now working, so that only one of them turns green appropriately. I don't know if that was a very good explanation, but that's kind of the idea. So what I did physically to change it was I added a location prop and passed down the router prop location down to navbar. And it made it visible for that navlink to see it. And that's why this is now working. So little update from yesterday. Questions about that, or? So if something like that's not working, always check and see if you have the router props, if whatever component needs to know about where it is has the information it needs, and if it makes sense. Cool. So then let's think about new trip. This is kind of where we were. I'm trying to type in here and I can't. So let's pick up with new trip. I think that's a good place to jump off from. So let's find that form, which is new trip form. And I think we kind of started to get this set up, and we kind of didn't finish this maybe two sessions ago. And this is where we need to be. So here's our form. here are our inputs. We've got a placeholder name, on change, and value for each of these things. Name and just name is coming from our prop. In other words, we're grabbing that from store. And I'm pulling that from, specifically from the new trip form state. So if we look at Redux, for example, and I look at my state, if I look at this new trip form, I've got name, start date, and end date. And as I type in here, nothing is happening, right? Something is clearly wrong. And so it's probably, let's start from the very beginning. What I want to know is along the way, right, I have a handle change. And I'm going to choose start date to play with actually, because that way I don't get confused with name. So handle change for start date is handle change. So let's just see that this thing ever fires. Console.log trigger handle change. Okay. And do we save it? Yes. If I look at the console, whoops.
Change is spelled wrong, I think.
Okay, it's just a little message. Thank you. You're right. Let's look at our console. Whoa. Okay. So I am triggering it, and apparently I was console logging. Where am I console logging the name, by the way? Oh, we already started to debug this. So I have a name console log, I believe, in my new trip form. So it looks like, so I'm console logging the name and the value. So the name is name. Okay, I said I was going to use start date. I started using name. So let's trigger start date. So we see that we are getting the name and the value from the component to the action creator. And that's good news. So now what I want to say is like, if I say const form data equals, and I want to do this, because that's what I'm actually passing along. That's the next thing I want to look at. Did I actually get this syntax correct? So now I'm going to console log this instead. Right? So I'm just taking one step at a time in debugging this. I want to say, okay, I can see I've got my name and value. So now let's see if form data looks like what I want it to be. And so as I type in this, it's looking correct, but it's clearly not accumulating, and neither is it showing up in the actual input. Okay. So this is, we're kind of getting there one step at a time. So let's see what happens when this gets dispatched. So it means that I need my new trip form reducer. Oops. Split this down. And let's see, in our reducer, we've got update new trip form. And what I want to see is kind of, what does this object look like? So I'm going to copy that object, and I'm going to say const return value equals this thing, and then I'm going to console log it. Okay, get rid of this console log. And let's try that. So I now have name, end date, value A. Okay, so now we see where the problem is lying. Does anyone see what it is? Can anyone tell by this console log what my problem is?
Are you nested?
It's not, it's kind of, yeah. So like, if we go back to where we were just like a second ago, so if I, let's console log this. So I'm going to console log both. So this is form data in the action creator, form data in the action creator, form data. Okay, if I save that, and now I'm going to see both things. So I'm going to see in the action creator what form data is, and then I'm going to see what the updated state from Redux is according to my reducer. So I'm going to type in the number 1, and I see form data in the action creator is name, start date, value 1. Okay. Wait, do I not have a console log here anymore? Return value. What happened to my return value? Oh, I'm not even hitting my reducer. That's definitely a problem. So wait a minute. Did I not just see us hitting, did we never see this console log? Am I crazy? Because what I actually want to return here is return val, what I've built. Return val, right? So we see this one. I don't see this one though, right? So it doesn't seem like we're actually dispatching. Yeah, so we're not hitting our, why are we not hitting our dispatcher or our reducer? Oh, okay, I see what's going on here. What else do I want to look at here? Let's look at the action. Definitely want to know, what does this action looks like? So the incoming action is, and let's check out this action. Let's see what's coming in here. Something funky is going on, for sure. Okay, and this is cool because now we're seeing, like, remember, every reducer gets called every time we fire a dispatch, right? Don't forget that. We can affect multiple reducers with one action dispatch. And we see that there's been 5 times that we've run through here on init. Apparently these, I wouldn't have even been able to tell you those were coming. Then we have init, then we've got set our current user, and then I've got this guy here. So now let's see what happens if I type in my end date, 0. Form data, the action creator. Ooh, that's interesting. What does it look like we're never doing? I know what I did. What did I do? What's the problem here? I don't see this being console logged. What is that telling me? What is that telling you? Anything?
Should you go back to the code?
Yeah, definitely.
You are hitting it. You are hitting the console log on line 8.
So this is, no, I'm not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not once I start typing in here. I should see the incoming spelled wrong, the incoming action, right? So, and I'll just to be clear, I'll say all caps in the reducer with lots of R's. Okay,
So
just
you got everything before, I guess.
Yeah, and this is like, if you don't run into this bug ever while you're building your code, congratulations. You should run into this bug. But this is how you recognize it. You put a console log in your reducer and you never hit it, right? What did we not do? Look carefully at this file, okay, this guy over here. And I might have to, I'm gonna go like, what can I collapse just a little bit here to make this more visible? Oh, good, it'll let me collapse the inputs. Okay, so cool, that's okay. So I'm gonna tell you everything's okay inside of here. Now look at it. What did I forget to do? This is such an easy mistake to make. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, you will make this if you haven't already.
Is it in your map state to props?
It's not map state to props that's the problem.
You don't have a map dispatch to props.
I'm using the short, you're getting warmer. I'm using the shorthand version of map dispatch to props, right? I'm just supplying an object as my second argument, which I sometimes refer to as map dispatch to props, right? Anyway, that's not a function. So go on, take that, and?
So your object, you need to take pieces of it.
Where? What object? Yes, you're right.
You're in your handle change.
I think my handle change is okay.
Okay, so then I don't know what.
No, okay, no. It is, my handle change is the problem, but it's not that I'm not getting. It's not that I'm not getting, like the name and the value, right? We saw that stuff's coming through.
So do you have to? Well, you don't. Would you? No, I'm just. So your dispatch to props in your export default connect. Mm-hmm. Getting an object, but you want an array of objects.
What?
Or you want a function.
I'm getting the right. I should be connecting to the right information. I'm getting the right piece of state, and I'm saying I want update new trip form as a prop. Okay, remember it's map state to props and map dispatch to props.
Oh, so you need to add props in your event target.
What do you mean?
Are you just not calling this dot props on it?
Sorry, Sally, what were you saying? And then
Sorry,
Justin?
you need to add props somewhere in your
Yes! Yes, I need to add props somewhere. What do you mean by that? Or Justin, maybe you were saying the same thing.
In your, like when you're calling it in line 10, you're just not calling it
yes.
dot props.
Yes, that's right. When on line 10, I'm invoking the action creator that's imported on line 2. The action creator that's imported on line 2 is nothing more than this function right here that I have highlighted. That's it. It's simply calling this function. This function's like, oh, you're giving me a name and a value? I'm going to do a console log for you. I'm going to return this object. And it's like, I don't know why you're having me do this, but I'll do it. Right? What did I not do? Well, the way that I have this set up, there's really one solution here. What is it? It does me no good to invoke this function. What do I need to invoke? You're right, Justin, right?
Just props the update new trip form.
Okay, so if this were a class component, yes, but it's not a class component. It's a functional component, and so I'm destructuring my props here. And what prop am I never bothering to destructure?
Your update new triple form.
Exactly, my update new. Whoa, I don't need to shout it. Update new trip form. So I never grabbed this incoming prop. And so when I made this method, this function invocation, a standalone function invocation, as you all know, or a simple function invocation, I was simply calling this function up here. But this guy is not the function I want to invoke. The one I want to invoke is the one that I get from Redux as props, right? Which is after when I pass this thing along, I'm giving it to Redux. I'm saying, Redux, here's an action creator. Take this action creator, and you know what to do. And Redux says, I do? Oh, I do. You're right. I know that when you now, I'm going to take this thing, and I'm going to take dispatch and your store and all the Redux things, and I'm going to splash it together, and I'm going to give it back to you as a prop now. Okay? And you told me that you wanted to call it update new trip form, right? So that's what I'm going to call it for you, as a prop. And now when you call that prop, you have the power to actually dispatch that action creator. I will, and Redux is saying, I'll dispatch it for you now when you apparently just invoke this function. Because line 10 should not be an invocation of this guy. It's an invocation of the prop we get back as a result of this down here. Right? It does no good to just call an action creator. It does nothing. We have to dispatch those actions. And here what I'm doing on line 51 is I'm telling Redux, please take this action creator, give it back to me as a prop, and when I call it, I want you to actually dispatch the action that it returns. And so that's what was missing, right? And now that I'm pulling it from props, now I'm actually, and why is this not a problem, by the way? This is just regular old JavaScript. Why is it okay now? Why will line 10 not be confused and think that I want this one up here anymore?
Well, because you deconstructed it, and it's now a function you can use in your handle chain.
Yes, but it's still a variable of the same name as this one up here. But why is that not a problem?
Because you're in scope and handle change.
Yes, I'm in the scope of handle change, which is inside of new trip form. The JavaScript will always start and find the most local version of whatever it is first, and it'll say, "Excuse me, handle change. Do you have something scoped to you called update new trip form?" Handle change is like, "No, I'm sorry, I don't. I don't know what you're talking about." And then so we move up the scope chain and we say, "Excuse me, new trip form, do you have something called update new trip form?" And new trip form now says yes. A few minutes ago it was saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." So we went all the way up to the global space within this file, and we found it up here. And that's not where we wanted to find it. We want to grab the prop. Okay.
Why are we importing it on line 2 if we don't want to use what line 2 gives us?
We do use what line 2 gives us, but we give it to Redux.
So it goes from like line 2 imports, update new trip form, the sync action, and then that goes down to line 52 the map dispatch to props?
Yes, we first grab the action creator. This is number, so 1. Oops, 1. We grab the action creator. 2. Oops. 2. We pass the action creator the redux connect function, either using I can't type today, map dispatch to props, or the shorthand object syntax seen below. 3. This means Redux gives us back a prop called update new trip form, which when invoked, actually Redux will dispatch. So now, 4, this is not an invocation of just the action creator. It's now Redux dispatching the action built by the action creator with the appropriate arguments.
Fix your spelling there. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm a little fuzzy on this, but where does the reducer file come into play with these steps you've listed out and like dispatching?
Okay, that's a good question. So are we okay? Let's one step at a time. We import our action creator. That's this guy right here. An action creator is a function that produces an action, and an action is just a plain JavaScript object. Okay. An action creator is also allowed to return a function if we're using thunk. So we grab that action creator, very simple thing, this thing, update new trip form. I pass that thing down to connect and say, here, Redux, here's an action creator. In other words, I want to be able to use the action produced here, dispatch it from this component. So please take it and take the action creator, and you know what to do with it. Redux says, yes, I do. What I will do with it is I'll give you now a function called update new trip form. It's not just this anymore. Instead, basically it means that what ends up happening is store.dispatch. This is what's actually happening now, right? So if remember that Redux store has a dispatch function, I should say method called dispatch that we could use to then actually dispatch this action. So it's kind of the same thing. If I just imported store, I could run this line of code instead, but that's not the way that we do it. We do it this way. And now this function invocation is no longer firing this. It's dispatching the action created from this action creator with the appropriate information passed in and now put into place. And now Redux will now dispatch from here. So line 17 is not just invoking this whole function. In fact, it's not invoking that function. It's giving it to Redux, and Redux will invoke the function for us and dispatch it. And this is the answer to your question, Annie. When this thing gets dispatched, right, dispatch, Redux's dispatch function, will take this action and it will invoke every reducer I have and pass this action along. And when any particular reducer is invoked, it switches on, we switch on action type and we go through case by case. If the case doesn't match, we just hit the default on each one. If that happens, Redux knows that it doesn't need to tell the components to re-render, okay, for whatever ones rely on that state. When we do match a case statement though, which is what's going to happen here, hopefully, then we will actually return something else. So when a reducer returns something other than what it was before, something other than the state, then that's a change in the store. Redux says, ooh, that's a change. And it replaces the old state with the new state for that particular piece of the store. In this case, just to be clear, if we look at the store, I am importing new trip form here as a reducer. I'm naming the function right there. That's this function right here, that reducer. And I'm inserting it into my Redux store, which is why we have it in Redux. That's why I have this thing right here. And when we actually make this change, the version, whatever piece of this thing I change is now replaces this piece of state. And then Redux tells React, hey, you, and you, and you rely on this piece of information. It just changed. You might want to re-render. Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Can I go back to just basic? In the action creator, your name and value, the name is from the name from your input form, and the value is the value defined in the input form?
Correct.
Okay.
So in our case, it might be something like, now we have to look at the form. Where'd it go? Here it is. So I closed them all. so the name might be something like end date, and the value might be January 13th, 2023, or something like that.
So that just gives you this total abstraction for the purposes of creating your form data object.
Yes, this is right, exactly. That way I don't have to declare which of these I'm dealing with at any given time and build different handlers for each one. So now, geez, I don't even know, did we actually fix it now? Let's find out. So now let's see what happens if I type in a name. Let's go to Hawaii, okay, because why not? If I look at my new trip form, my name now says let's go to Hawaii. Let's start today, okay? I don't have any restrictions on this, but we could say like, let's go July 1st. Who's coming with me, y'all? Who's coming to Hawaii with me? And let's stay there until, I don't know, July, let's do this way, 7, let's stay there until the 10th of 2020. There we go. A solid year and a week in Hawaii. And so now we can see this is all updating correctly. Everybody okay with that? Is everybody okay with this flow? Because that flow you need to own. And it doesn't mean you need to be able to say it today or say it tomorrow. It doesn't mean you need to be super duper awesome with every bit of technical pieces describe. What he said. Doesn't mean that you have to be absolutely perfect with absolutely everything you say about it, but you do need to describe how we get from how we affect a change in the Redux store. And so this is kind of the flow over and over and over again. That's how it happens, what we just talked about. Are we okay? How are we feeling? We doing okay?
Yeah, it's doing okay.
Okay.
It's trial and error.
It's trial and error. It's a lot. It's a lot of words. It's a lot of stuff. But this is the flow. So let's continue with this flow because this isn't all we want to do, right? So once I've populated this form, we're going to say Hawaii 2019, and it's going to be 7 1 07 01 2019 and 07. Let's just say this year, I guess. So 7/10 2019. Okay. So when I click create trip, I want something to happen. Nothing is happening. Okay, of course. So where do I begin with that? Here's my form.
Submit, your handle submit.
Yeah, and all I have right now is I've got to prevent default, which means that nothing's happening, which is good, right? So, but this clearly needs to be an entire function of sorts, right? So, cool. So what else needs to happen here? What am I trying to do here?
You need to take the values you input and have the store updated based on.
Okay. Do I have the values?
You have
Do I have them in my hand?
You
Right.
have them in state, right? In store?
Well, and did I get them from store already in this component? You're right there.
Right, you should have them.
I do. I 100% have them, and I actually went ahead and spread them. I could have just grabbed them into one object. I have them. I went ahead and split them into 3. I don't know, maybe just regular old. It's like 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I could have just done return form data pointing to state.new trip form if I wanted to, right? I could do that. So I'm just showing you like different ways I could do the same thing. And then I'm going to grab, instead of all this stuff, just going to be form data. And in my, this is functional. So let's see, before my return, I can say something like const name, start date and end date. I can do that there. This dot props dot, no, not this dot props. Goodness, it's this form data. There we go. And that should still work the same way. I can put this up at the top if I wanted to. That might be nice. That way I'm destructuring this. But I also kind of like the idea of having form data available, because then I can send it along all at once. That's the reason I just made that change. I don't know, whichever one floats your boat. Let's just make sure we didn't break it, which we did. Unexpected token. And there we go.
Oh, you have a typo on end date.
Thank you. The end data. That sounds doesn't sound good. Okay, cool. Let's see if we're working still. And okay, so now I have. Will this give me Hawaii? No, why not? Okay, Hawaii. Oh, good. There it is. There we go. That's cool. Perfect. Okay, so when I create this trip, I actually want something to happen here besides preventing the default. What do I want to happen?
Sorry, just quickly on the map state to props, the way you changed it, because you had explicitly the keys on the bottom.
Right.
But then you changed it to form data state.new trip form. So
I was just thinking when I pass this information along, I can just pass along form data instead of building an object.
okay, so the state.new trip form gives you the values you're defining form data as.
Yeah, now I'm just making the destructuring here so that I can still just reference them directly inside of my values here.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know. I didn't have to make that change. I don't know. We can go back. Doesn't really matter. One way or the other. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So let's see. What do I want to do? Let's think about it. And what steps do I have to take to get there?
Well, do you have an action creator for adding trips?
I do not. I don't think. So let's look at first of all, so I'm going to open my reducer for my trips. I'm going to open my action creators for my trips. And I have get my trips. That's the only asynchronous one I have. And I've got clear trips and I've got set my trips. So I don't have one for creating a trip. So, and like the order here is kind of, you have to find your own pattern of how you like to add a piece of state in Redux. Do you want to go with the reducer first? Do you want to go to the action creator first? Do you want to write code that you wish you had inside of your component and then add it all, backfill it, with stuff that actually exists? It's kind of up to you. I like, for when I first add a piece of state that doesn't exist in the store, I want to start with my reducer and get it to show up in my Redux DevTools. That's like always going to be step one for me. I do have a state of my trips already, and that's the state that's going to change. So then I feel like here I would actually start with my action creator. And there's 2 action creators that I think I would want to, I would need one for add trip, which would be the sort of the synchronous version. Once I have the trip, I need to be able to add it. So add trip, and it's going to take a trip. And let's see, it's going to return an action of type add trip and the trip. And then the reducer for that's going to be really easy, I think. because I'm just going to concatenate it onto the end of my trips, right? So I'm going to say add trip. There it is. And return action.trips.concat. Action.trips. Oops, not action.trips, return state.trips. There we go. So that's pretty easy, right? All I'm doing is concatenating onto the end. So I've got my reducer and my synchronous action creator already built, because those are fairly simple. And the real meat of it's going to be in the asynchronous action creator. This is going to be create trip. And I know I need some info, right? Some trip info or trip data or whatever. Oops. Now, this is an asynchronous action creator, meaning I need to wait for something to happen in order to be able to then update my store. What am I going to return from an asynchronous action creator?
Promise?
Not a promise. You're one step ahead with the promise return. What am I going to return from the asynchronous action creator itself?
You return a function with dispatch.
A function. And then, Chris, what does that function return? Very often a promise. Yes. I'm sorry, Justin, you said a function that takes dispatch. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, that's exactly right. So like, I could write it this way, by the way, just to be clear. I could write it this way. It doesn't matter. Okay, either of these ways will work. I could even name it if I wanted to for, whatever, the returning, I don't know what I would call it, create trip dispatcher, right, if I wanted to. It doesn't do me any good to name this other than for identification or debugging purposes or something. But I could do it either way. I tend to like to use arrow functions, which means that I don't need the smooth parentheses if it's just one argument, and it's just dispatch. So this is a function expression that I'm returning. And this is the one then, Chris, where we're typically going to return, or very often we'll return a promise. And you don't necessarily, nobody's going to enforce you to return this, but you may have code somewhere else that requires this promise to come through so you can continue chaining on it. Kind of up to you. Cool, so I'm going to return a fetch, which will fetch all the stuff. And then, let's figure out what do we want to do. Where do we want to fetch? What do we want to fetch?
Is it the API URL?
Yep. So it's HTTP:/. By the way, I highly recommend that you build a const for this that I should have done somewhere, like for the base URL instead of writing it every time. In fact, you could also extract like an API class or an API file or object, something to help you to build these a little bit faster. But for now, we're just hard coding each one. Localhost 3001. And then to create a trip, what should the URL be?
Trips/new.
Careful.
Oh.
So trips new back in our RESTful days would show us the form. And we do need that. So yes. So let's not forget that we need that. And I think we already have it, right? Because that's what we see here, right? And that's why we see the form. So trips new shows us the form, but where do we send the request RESTfully? What's the RESTful convention for creating something?
Is it create?
It's the create action. So what URL routes RESTfully anyway to the create action of a resource?
I think it's post to trips.
That's exactly right. It's post and then plural of the resource. That's the RESTful convention for where we send this information. And so I need my options open. So my URL is the first argument. My options, including headers, are the second argument. So the first thing I'm going to say is method post, right? What other things should I include now before I forget? We're logged in, remember, right?
You need headers. Credentials.
Yeah, credentials. Let's not forget our credentials. And those are not part of the headers. That's a mistake I made previously. Those live on the same line of like method and the same line as headers, by the way. In my headers, I'm going to include, I like to be very specific here. I'm going to say I do want content type of application JSON. Application JSON. And what else do I need then to create something? And a fetch request.
You just send the body, the data you're sending?
Yeah, I need the body. And the body is going to be, this is like our big question mark. By the way, this is one possible URL. I guess I might not be ready to ask this question yet, but can anyone off the top of their head think of a different URL for this that would still be RESTful and appropriate, even if we don't have it set up yet? That was a terribly vague question. We could also have a nested route where we're sending to like localhost 3000/users/user ID/trips, right? And still posting to that. And then the user ID would automatically be included in the parameters from the ID or from the URL, but I can just include it here as well, or I should be able to anyway. So we've got the trip data, I've got my dispatch, I got my fetch. What do I need to do here? I need to build what? This thing. What does it need to look like? What is it? Just trip data? Like, and this is where we have to think about. What does this object look like? What does it need to look like? What information is required? And right now we can see, like, if I wanted to, I could just go over here and grab this thing and kind of copy it. This is what we have right now, right? So my form data looks like this. So my form data, besides the word pin, this is what my form data looks like right now. Okay, I'll just comment that out. Oh, okay. So this is what it looks like. So here I am, and I need to get this information at least to this action creator that I just built. So what are my steps here, and how am I going to do this?
Aaron, you have a typo on line 53 on your action creator.
Thank you. My comment type. Thank you. So I need to get this information over to this thing. So first of all, does this component, new trip form, know anything about create trip?
No.
Do I need to change that?
Yes.
Okay. So I need to import the action creator. Okay, let's make sure that didn't break anything. Great. And now, based on the flow that we just talked about a moment ago, what are my next steps?
Add create trip to your export defaults as your map dispatch to props.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right. So I'm adding create trip to my map dispatch to props object. Absolutely. Which means that my very next step that we're not going to forget this time. But I'm glad we forgot, because that was a good discussion, and it feels like hopefully that was helpful.
So now your const new trip form, you need to add your new props object.
I'm going to pluck that create trip. Now this bulked up Redux version of create trip. It's not this guy. It's this thing after being passed through create trip. You know, before it got passed through connect, it was just this measly little function like, yeah, I'm just this little guy, I don't really do anything. And now Redux is like, and now this create trip is the Redux version that's capable of actually being dispatched on invocation by Redux automatically. We don't have to worry about it. It's going to take care of things. It's going to be beautiful. So let's just do that. Let's come in here. We have it available. Let's create trip. Okay. And I'm going to pass in my what?
Form data?
Yeah, and this is kind of where I grabbed it. Maybe think I should have kept it the other way. Now, the more I think about it, I should have just left it the way it was. But here it is so far. So there it is, and let's see what that does. And what I want to know is, first of all, will this just work? Like, will I just be able to create something? And let's at least see what's going on here. So I'm going to say .then. I need
to destructure it.
What's that?
Create trip.
Mm-hmm.
Here? Do you need to destructure it from somewhere? Oh no, it is up there.
Yeah, I'm getting it. I'm getting it already from the Redux store. Although you're on to something. Do you know why you're right? You're definitely onto something. So think about why that might be a good idea. Or likewise, think what's missing right now. So let's see what kind of response we get back from the backend right now. So we're going to just roll the dice. We're getting trip data. Trip data is this form data object. It's actually just this thing right there, right? So name, start date, and end date. And like, if we just kind of roll the dice and see what happens, like who can have some guesses, or do we just want to go for it and see? This is going to be Hawaii. It's going to be 7. It's going to be 7. And I really wanted to see my console because I want to see what this response is going to look like. So when I click create trip, great. So I got my fetch request and it's a bad request. What? Nothing came back? What in the world? Nothing to preview. Oh my gosh, what is happening? So where do I look?
Okay, Howard. So I think I know why you were asking me that question.
Okay.
You need the trips key.
Trips key. What do you mean the trips key?
To get through your strong params.
Oh, okay. Maybe, but maybe and maybe not. Okay, you're on the right track, 100%. So where would I look now to try and debug this? So hold that thought. Yes. Where would I look to try and debug that?
Your controller?
Yeah, definitely my controller. And like the first thing I want to know is, where did I even try to send a request? Let's look at the headers. We sent a post request to localhost 3000 trips, and we got bad requests, right? All right, let's see what happened with that. So I definitely want to look, like I want to know my routes for one thing. So like, let's check out my routes, localhost 3001 /rails/info/routes. And this I need to zoom out just a hair, sorry. And let's look for where is my just /trips? This is, so I said this and I literally, it doesn't, what's that?
You might not have a route.
I don't, right? Clearly, because all my routes start with API v1 and I forgot to type that. This is what I meant when I said you should 100% have your base URL in a constant somewhere that you can just grab, and I don't. And so I made that mistake. I didn't do that intentionally. But anyway, so now let's go back, and it's one of those, don't forget these types of things. So let's go back to Hawaii. There it is. July, create trip, and we still got a bad request. Okay, so now we went here. This looks much better because I think I can match that route now. Here. So now API, I'm looking for post API v1 trips, and there it is. Okay, that seems to be there. Let's look in the controllers for API v1 trips, and let's see if we have a create action. There it is. So what I want to know first is, did we get here? Like, did we arrive to this place? So I am logged in, right? Just to be clear. I must be. Let's just add something to tell us who we are real quick. I know I had this before and I took it out, but I want to put it back quick. So I guess right next to that log out button would make sense. So that is in my, this is way too many things open. Close things as you go. So in my nav bar, I think is where that is, right? So log out, log out. Okay, so let's do more than just this. Let's do, this is a little bit ugly, a little bit much, but that's okay. Hopefully, we're gonna say, I don't even know what this should be. A little tiny p tag maybe. Log in as current user dot name. Is that going to work? Yeah. Where's my name though? Is there not a current user dot name? Redux. Current user. Oh, attributes name. Current user dot attributes name. This is going to be equals logged in, and we're just going to make that tiny. Did I give that an ID? Font size, I don't know, 8 pixels or something, or 7 pixels. Okay. Logged in, it's not. There we go. All right, good enough for now. So we are logged in clearly, and let's see. So I just want to make sure that we could see that much more clearly, even though we shouldn't see the log out button if we're not logged in. So we can see that we're logged in, and let's look at that request again. This was Hawaii. This was July something. This is, oh, now they're showing up. Good. Okay, bad request. And my question is, do we even get, let's see, go away. Here we go. And let's bring this front and center now. This is what I'm interested in at this point. So do we get here, right? So let's drop a bybug in. And I want to know, like, is Rails even allowing us? Are we getting to this action? Are we getting to this controller action? By the way, let's add a dot catch. And let's console log that error if we get it as well. And let's check our console. I don't think we had anything going on there. Nope. So if we look back at network, let's do this again. Hawaii, July 10th. There we go. Okay, bad request. And we're not catching here. So let's see what's going on. Post API v1 trips. An error occurred for parsing request parameters. Object is what we got, okay? This is another error that you're likely to see from time to time. Any idea what is happening here? Any thoughts? So this is Rails saying, y'all, I don't know what to do with this thing. What is object? Let's go back and look at the request. Here it is.
It looks like an array when it should be receiving an object.
It's not exactly an array. That's so like if I tried to I wonder if I can get that to show. I don't know if I can get that to show up or not. I think I can. Let's try it. Let's go to app.js and I'm going to say something like const my object equals name Howard. Okay. And inside my div, the first thing I'm going to do is just say my object. Okay, if I save that, will that do what I want it to? What's the matter? What happened?
Don't you have to go to console?
Objects are not valid as React child. So React is not allowing to see what I want. But basically it's saying I don't take an object. But if this weren't React and this was just like HTML, if this was raw HTML, if I did this, you would see on the screen, and you probably saw this in your Rails JavaScript project at some point along the way, square bracket object, square capital, little o, capital O object. And basically what it is like, I know this thing is an object, but I don't know, you didn't tell me what else to do with it. And the problem is that I didn't use JSON.stringify. So when I passed along the body, I just passed along that raw object, and this is what's showing up there. So remember to JSON.stringify your bodies as you send them. Stringify, there we go. Your trip data. Okay, so let's do that and see what happens now. So at the very least, first I'm going to pull that debugger for just a moment. So, or the bybug here, just for a second. We'll probably come back to it. But let's just try and create this thing again. So we're going to Hawaii in July. We're coming back, and we're creating the trip. Okay, this is much better. Now it says unprocessable entry. Great. Okay, now we're coming around the corner, Chris, toward what you said. And let's bring the bybug back in. And who knows? Who already is like, I know what the problem is. And Chris, you take it away if you want to extrapolate on what you said.
Well, I'd have to look at your strong params.
Okay, here are my strong params.
Which ones are using the trip params? That's it.
Yep.
So somehow there's got to be a trip tag in there on top of the start date, end date, location ID.
Okay, and that's a really good thought. In fact, maybe you saw something I posted recently about that type of thing. There may or may not need to be. If I'm dealing with an API and I'm sending and receiving this JSON information, Rails will attempt, if I don't provide this, and what you're saying, Chris, is I need to provide the trip object or the trip key, right? And that's what the very first thing you said, you need to provide a trip key, right? A property called trip as a top level of this object. And that would be like the more verbose, easy way of doing it. Or at least I should say it's a good thing to do for sure. But what did I send? Did I send a key anywhere inside of that thing with a start underscore date or an end underscore date or a location underscore ID?
No.
No. So what gives? Like, notice that there's a discrepancy. So even once I fix this, there's going to be a discrepancy here because these params don't match. They don't match simply because of syntax conventions. I'm using camel case because this is JavaScript land, and I've got snake case on my backend. So, and like this is where we come to a matter of opinion. Do we go ahead and change all of our props to snake casing so we never have to worry about this issue on the front end? Do we go to Rails and try and set up Rails or change the names of our attributes in Rails to camel casing? Some APIs will provide an automatic translator from snake to camel casing. I should look that up. That might be a configuration I can change actually. But an easy way to do it would be to do something like this. And I should do this as locally as possible, which means in my returning function here, I'm going to say const real trip data, sendable trip data equals, and then I'm going to have to do something like this. So I should have just, well, it doesn't matter now. It doesn't matter how I do this, I guess. But now I need to build this object, and it needs to actually have, and I'm going to go along with Chris. We'll show both ways. I'm going to start with the more verbose way, actually. So I'm going to build an object whose main key is trip, who actually has these attributes, right? Formatted that way. So start date, and then this is going to be trip data dot start date, comma, and start date is going to be end date, end underscore date. This is going to be end date. This is going to be name. I should have, I'm looking at this and realizing I need to update those strong params. Name would have been the same, that's okay. What else do I need though to provide to my backend based on the fact that I'm not using nested parameters? There's one other piece of data that I need to send along.
Is it the user ID? I forget which ID, but there is a.
Yes, I definitely need a user ID. And basically this trip data needs more information. And so I'm just going to go ahead and say trip data.user ID, user ID, even though I know that that's not there yet, I'm going to grab it. So let's see. So let's go and do that real quick. Let's get that out of the way. This is my form data right now. So I'm actually not just going to pass in form data. If I look through this, I don't have the current user here. So, but since this is the power of Redux. Hey, I just need the current user's ID. I don't even need any other information. So current user ID. I can even just say user ID, right? User ID. I can call it whatever I want. And I'm going to point this thing to state.currentUser. And I'm going to double check that I get the right attribute nesting going on here. So current user. And it is actually, so they do provide the top level ID. This is when I say they, I'm talking about FastJSON API. I do get ID top level. So that's nice. So that does say current user.id. And so I'm just I'm plucking only the tiniest little bit of state that I need from Redux into this component. Now I have user ID. So as a prop now available to me, this is why Redux is so freaking awesome. I just grab it now and I destructure it and I now have it available. So instead of passing the form data object of itself, I'm going to spread that out and pass a new object which includes all the information from the form data, and I'll open this up to make it maybe a little more readable. And I'm going to pass along now my user. Let's see, I'll just call it user ID. That's how I have to call it, actually. And now this, the key I'm referring to is formatted that way, and its value is now what I have added as a prop, so I can just use the shorthand syntax that way. Now when I save this, I should have all the trip information, including the ID. And now I can JSON.stringify my sendable trip data, which includes that top level key, includes all 4 pieces of information. That means I also need to go update my strong params, because this was an old version of strong params when I first scaffolded this out, and this is all I had. I no longer need the location ID because we changed we changed how this thing was built. This is now going to be user ID. And
can I ask you a question about that location ID?
absolutely.
Was that originally just a attribute of that trips class, or was it a whole nother class in your API?
Both. It was when I first built this, and we made some changes in my models. My trip used to belong to a location. That was the original way we set it up, and we changed it. And I never dumped. And so because I scaffolded those controllers after that original version, that's what shows up automatically in strong param. So it's up to me to fix it. And then I still need to pluck that out of the database. I don't think I ever did.
Okay.
I need to pull in the schema, for example, this is wrong. If I look at trip, it should not have location ID. And I just lazy, and I just haven't ever taken the time to just get that out of there. It shouldn't be there.
Well, I mean, no biggie, like things change, but
Yep.
it did kind of like raise a question for me. It was something I was confused about, was when you have those relationships and when, a certain class has the ID of another one to describe that relationship, what do you create first?
That's a great question. And so, and it depends, right? It depends on, first of all, whether they're optional, right? So you might get an error from Active Record saying that, for example, in this case, it might have said location must exist or user must exist on that belongs to relationship. Whereas if I provide an optional true, when I create so if I come into, for example, trip, and I say belongs to user optional true, I think that's the syntax. I'm not going to swear that that's right, but it's something that means the same thing as optional true. This is saying, well, you don't have to have a user. As opposed to now, if I try and point it to a user and it doesn't exist, it might say, well, user must exist. So it's up to you to make those choices. And once you do, then when you create something that relies on another object, then the answer to your question finally, that I'm taking a long time to answer, is I would need to create the user first. So if I try to point
Is there any way to do it all in one go, like create the user and create the attractions and locations and visits?
How big of a form are you sending?
Well, it's not very big. I just have 3 classes. But.
Absolutely. So the question is, could you use one controller action to create 3 different things? Sure. You can use one form and create as many things as you want, right? There's nothing preventing you from doing that. So for example, just to kind of my point, suppose that I had in my trips, you could also a little subform that said, what locations did you go to? And what attractions did you see? And so in my create, I could instantiate my trip. Then I could say, attractions, and this is just so like attractions.finder create,
Cool, yeah.
Basically so this is total like hardly even pseudocode, but attraction.
Yeah, no, I think I get what you're trying to say.
Each, finder create for each one, and then associate them back to the trip for each location, finder create each one, associate them back to the trip, et cetera, et cetera. And then
and that's considered okay to do all in the trips controller rather than the other controllers?
Well, it's up to you. Like, does it make sense? Does it make sense that you would submit one form instead of having to like go submit 3 different forms? Does it make sense for your user experience?
It does. It does.
Then
cool.
I don't see why not. Yeah.
Okay, it's good to know.
Yeah. We bear in mind things like least visibility principle and single responsibility principle, and try and keeping things where they belong. But but we also have to consider our user experience, and like if you stick to if you go back to a Rails app and you only have RESTful conventions and you only have RESTful routes and they only ever do one thing each, what kind of a terrible UI is that? So you have to consider that as well, right?
Okay, yeah.
why
Thank
else-
you
why
for
would-
this explanation.
Sure, you could have some you could create more than just a trip from this thing if you had to. You could also build class methods to handle that if it's helpful for whatever reason. Cool. So let's just are we at a place where we want to try this again, or did we just fail again? I forget where we are. Couldn't read property ID of null. Okay, current state dot current ID dot null. Ooh, great. So state dot current user should not be null. Why is that null? Oh, crap. So that's, does anyone know where this is happening? It's happening on init.
You're not logged in?
No, I am, but the fetch request hasn't resolved that I am yet. So unfortunately, crap. Is there an easy way to do this? So I hate to do this. I'm going to do it. I don't care. I'm going to turn this into a ternary. So if my current user exists, that's going to be state.current-user. Actually, no, the easier way to do this with this is going to be less ugly. So state const current user ID. So I'll just say user ID. That's what I want to call it. User ID equals state.current-user.id. No matter what. No, because then it's still null. So then I do have to put the ternary here. That's fine. Okay, fine. So if it's there, if the state.current-user exists, then it's going to be state.current-user.id. Otherwise, I guess for an ID, do I want it to be, I guess an empty string. It's going to be a string, right? That's what it's going to end up being. So I guess I'm okay with that. So it's just going to be current user ID. So what I had to just do is when init fire, there is no current user no matter whether we're logged in or not. And if I try and draw on, and the problem too is that I set up my current user as null, and I've debated whether that was a bad idea and I should have just set it up as an empty object. Because if it was just an empty object that I knew would just be undefined, it's no problem. With null, it is a problem. I don't know. I could go back and restructure that. But instead, I'm just going to say, well, I know when init fires, my current user is null. And so we'll just say the current user's ID is an empty string. Is that really what I want? I don't know. It's going to work for now. Maybe. Actually, I don't know if that's going to cause a problem here. We'll see. Oh, what did I break? State.currentUser. Const current user ID equals, oh, I don't need this because I'm not inside of JSX. There we go. I get trapped inside JSX so often, I forget where and when I'm not. Okay, so now let's try and create this Hawaii trip and see what in the world happens on the back end. So let's watch, create trip. Ooh, pending. Ooh, internal server error. Okay, good things. Undefined method trip. Oh crap! So this is the problem with using scaffold generators. Don't ever use them. Build everything by hand. This thing is trying to return to me a location. I never even paid attention to what it was returning. That's also bad. Don't do that. But I do want to render JSON this trip, and actually what I want to render here is going to be response equals error, and I think I'm just going to say trip.errors.full, whoops. So all it needs to be trip.errors.full underscore messages.toSentence. Cool, okay, so that looks better, right? Render JSON response. I should call it like error response. Status unprocessable. Okay, that's better. So if we succeed, we're going to render JSON trip with the status created. Otherwise, so actually, if we drop into our, we could also drop into our Rails console. I think that we actually just created our Hawaii trip. Now let's just double check. I say Rails console, and I say trip.last. I think we're going to see our trip to Hawaii. What? Rails.
Was it the console? Yeah, I missed the N in that word.
Oh, thank you. It was console. I've been doing that a lot today, huh? So if we go to the console, so just don't type that much. I was trying to type too much. Our last trip is indeed our trip to Hawaii, successfully created, belonging to user number 1. Nadia gets to go everywhere apparently. So that's good. So that's kind of good news, right? So now this thing worked. I do want to show that if I remove the trip top level and I move these all over so it looks nice. So I just removed Chris's suggestion which is a good suggestion, of that top level key. And I run this again. And let's say Hawaii 2020. And for whatever reason, it's like very much the same looking trip. Now when I create this trip, it still worked. And the reason was that if I supply an object and so my params, if we were to look at the params that just processed, which are here, okay. So these are the parameters. Notice we have top level keys of start date, end date, name, and user ID. Rails, will Rails actually show me here or not? So notice that Rails, that's weird that it looks like that, but Rails actually will supply that top level key. In other words, they'll say, okay, I guess you want, these are all trip stuff. And as long as when they're whitelisted, first of all, here, and they are actually columns in that database. So in the trips database in this case, as long as these are all columns in the database, they will be allowed through. In the case where you're creating a user, password, for example, is not in the database as a column because password digest is, because we all use bcrypt for our passwords. And so very often password will get filtered out in this case that you don't supply the top level key. And in that case, supplying the top level key is the answer, Chris, yes. In this case, I could go either way because Rails will attempt to basically sort of say, okay, you didn't supply a trip key, but we're guessing that that's what you meant to do. And so as long as these are all actually columns in the database, we're going to allow them. Okay, so that's why it works both ways. Great. So now we have to stop because I'm out of time. But the next step is I want to update my URL. Like I want to go somewhere else, wherever that is. I want to do the things that a successful crypt does. I want to clear this form if I have to. I want to go somewhere else. I want to spread the news that we've created this trip. And then I want to definitely be able to see them. And there's Hawaii. Ooh, wait, where's 2020? Uh-oh, that's weird. Didn't we create that? So that's a problem. Oh, we never updated our store, right? No, we did. We should have. No, we never dispatched the action to do so. This is only showing because I had a hard refresh in between. So even though we built the action creator, we built the store, we never actually like fired those things off, and we need to do that. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do it now, but we will pick right up with this next week on our very next episode.
Awesome.
Everybody have an awesome weekend.
Thanks, Howard.
Yep. Don't hesitate to ask questions, and I look forward to seeing you all again, hopefully Monday or Tuesday, and we'll get this thing. We'll finish up our CRUD. We got a good step in the right direction. Everything here is easy. So we still need to finish up this one and get edit and delete, and then also get our little show actions going, show pages going.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Have a great day.
Good weekend.
Okay, you too. Bye.